And welcome to the Gampel Effect, where UConn basketball is more than a game. It's an atmosphere. We're going to be breaking down Husky hoops with real analysis, real opinions, and fan energy that makes Storrs special. The Gampel Effect is a UConn men's basketball podcast focused on smart analysis, game breakdowns, and culture behind one of college basketball's premier programs. From X's and O's to banners and big moments, this is UConn basketball the way it's meant to be. I am Dan Katz, former WHUS sports director with over 30 plus years of following UConn basketball, and I am joined by my co-host, John Harner.
Hey, Dan, glad to be here with you. Looking forward to this podcast.
So John and I are two UConn alumni, proud class of 05. We were there for the Ben Gordon and Emeka Okafor championship number 2. And we're here. We really want to focus, especially today, on UConn's recent stretch where they stack up nationally, some player recognition and snubs. February and March from the 22-23 season, 23-24. We're going to start off with a Xavier recap, and we're going to wrap up with a St. John's preview. So let's start with how everyone's feeling right now, John. This team's on a run. Is it smoke and mirrors? And according to Coach Hurley, he's saying UConn over the past couple of games has played bulletproof basketball.
It's kind of hard to disagree with him on that. When you're blowing out your Xavier by 30 points at halftime, I haven't seen this team perform that well all season. And I gotta admit, it's the first time all year that they actually played 40 minutes of good basketball. You and me have been talking about this for the whole season, and we've been waiting for a moment like this, and it's finally come. So I'm kind of agreeing with Coach right now that was pretty close to bulletproof, near perfection for once from this team.
And, UConn over the past couple of championships and really over the last 4 years, January really has been kind of that month of swoon. It's like the dog days of summer in baseball in August. But for UConn, there wasn't really many signs that, you look at the Providence game where they won at Gampel, no Braylon Mullins as he was recovering from his concussion. They win that game 87-81. Now, Providence does have a lot of talent led by Coach Kim English. But if you look at their record, that's a game you really felt that UConn should have handled by double digits. And again, they really didn't have those Evan Maya knockout runs, those 10-0s. They win that game 87-81. They had to Creighton, their house of horrors. Creighton lifetime against Dan Hurley while he's been in the Big East was 9-3. You think back to last year with the famous "I got 2 rings" Baldy from Danny Hurley to the fans. Did we really see this coming? What do you attribute to this major turnaround and UConn really rounding into form, particularly over the past 2 games?
Well, one, obviously, it's nice to have Mullins back healthy and actually have a full team back healthy. So that definitely helps the situation. But 2, I think most importantly, is they're connected on defense. You could see in the games that we struggle, obviously, it's the defensive rebounding. If you looked at Arizona, I think we lost by the boards by 20, and somehow we were still in that game and had a chance at the end to win it. But if in these last 2 games you saw very little offensive rebounding from Creighton and Xavier and defense, and we've been just clearing up defensively. And I also think our rotation too, when we do in the hedges, the guys on the weak side are doing nice rotation, sticking with their man. And when the shot does go up, they're boxing out for once too. And I think that's really the key. You saw that once we got the rebound, we've been able to push, which we really haven't done all year, I don't think. And in the last 2 games, you could see Mullins and Silas and Ball, and then when you get the bench players coming in, start pushing the ball. And that makes everything so much easier for everybody else on the floor.
Yeah, no, and that really last year was something that lacked. You can't get on Hassan Diarra, who really played his heart out and gutted it out with the knee injuries. We really didn't have that backup point guard last season. The Aiden Mahaney experience really wasn't what
Yes.
UConn was looking for. Um, and Danny really attacked that over the offseason. Danny Kamani and Luke and Mike Nardi really going out and trying to figure out who are 2 point guards that we could bring into our program to really change that culture, that defensive pressure. And, that really lends itself into Silas Demary Jr. and Malachi Smith. What two great finds. And, to your point, looking at the last 2 games, they held Creighton to 41% from the floor. Creighton was 5 of 21 from three. UConn dominated the glass 33-21. Last night against Xavier, they held them to 36% from the floor. Xavier was 6 of 17 from three. But more importantly, UConn out-rebounded Xavier 37-23. And one thing that I'm seeing is we're really getting that rebounding from our guards. Silas, Braylon, even Solo, I know he was in foul trouble early on. They're doing a much better job of finding a body and grabbing those rebounds, which are leading, to your point, the transition, which is something we really haven't seen over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and 100% agree with you. And it's nice when you do have your guards rebounding and getting in there and helping out. We're not really a big team in grand theory. Like when you go up against a Michigan potentially in the Final Four, it's going to be interesting to see. But when you get the guards coming back to help, get the ball in their hands, and then they can push it up the floor, and especially if you have bigs that are willing and able to run the floor, man, that makes life so much easier for this team.
And what? One of the things that I think UConn has always done a wonderful job with this motion offense and this Euro offense that Danny has implemented over the past 4 or 5 seasons is ball movement. And if you look at the Providence game, they had 23 assists on 29 field goals. Against Creighton, they really didn't need as much because there were a lot of turnovers, but 16 assists on 33 field goals. Last night, 26 assists on 34 field goals. Silas Demary leads the Big East in assists per game at 6.2. But if you're looking at it, last 3 games, Caravan is also a focal point, and it really doesn't get talked about as much. In the Providence game, Alex had 7 assists. Silas had 6. Last night against Xavier, Silas had 8 assists, 7 in the first half to really get that engine going, that 50-22 halftime lead. But Alex also had 6 assists. And you and I have talked about this. Alex is really like that warm blanket for UConn basketball. When they need him, he comes up big. One of the things I'm seeing with him, I'm interested on your perspective. He's starting to come off that high screen and curl to the basket, and it's really creating mismatches for this UConn offense.
Absolutely. Last night you saw it about a handful of times that he did that. He saw his defender, I think it was Carroll, both times was trailing him, and he saw it and looked back, didn't even hesitate, didn't do that little dribble and make sure straight to the hole. And he's a student of the game. That's what he is. He knows the game well. He's been in the system, which seems like for almost like 15 years now. So he knows exactly what to do in every situation that arises out there. And like you said, I think sometimes he takes a back seat to other players and is looking to get everybody else involved. But I think we're at a best when he is looking to create shots, whether it's off the dribble or, on the pick and pop or whatever it may be. Because if he starts hitting, if he starts driving, I mean, then you got pick and roll opportunities with Reed. Then you got the kicks to the corner for the shooters. And like I said, everything opens up from there. And then that also helps out Mr. Demry too, spreading the floor for all the guards on the perimeter. So if Alex can keep playing like the way he did over the past 3 or 4 games and continue this until March and hopefully April, then UConn should be in a decent shape.
Well, I think what's interesting when you look at Alex, he's one of those guys that's a stat stuffer without even realizing what's going on. He
Right.
goes in the lulls. You know, if you look back at the Georgetown game where he didn't score at all in the first half and then explodes towards the end of the game. You know, whenever this UConn team is in need of a basket, he seems to be ever present. And it's just huge for him. And, you know, I'm looking at the 3-point numbers. Donnie Marshall was talking about this during the game and the broadcast last night. They're averaging about 26 threes a game over the past 4 games. Now, the difference between now and the beginning of the Big East season is they're hitting them.
Right.
What do you think attributes to that? What's the difference?
I personally, I think it's they have a better flow on offense. I think they're coming either off the screen in rhythm. They're getting cleaner looks, I will say, especially against Creighton and Xavier. And then I just think they're just have more confidence now. That once you start seeing shots go in, man, it's so much easier to shoot those shots. But I think the looks that they're actually getting are cleaner looks, and that's because they're running crisper offense. Sometimes I think this team gets a little too complacent offensively, just goes through the motions, doesn't really run the set. They'll run the set, but they don't run it with any intention of hard cuts. Sometimes they look a little lackadaisical out there. But I think Danny and the staff over the last 3 or 4 games kind of drilled it into them. Hey, you start running your sets crisp with bad intentions, you're going to get easy shots. And I think that's what we're seeing over the last 3 to 4 games.
And to your point, you know, you think about the way this UConn team's been constructed. You have Silas at the point, you have Solo at the 2, you have Braylon at the 3, Alex at the 4, Terrace at the 5. When you think about floor spacing, you know, you really have those 4 guys on the perimeter and the Kodiak bear down low. It's just what they can do, the pressure they put on defenses. And, you know, when we have Jaden Ross and Jalen Stewart coming off the bench and hitting shots and their confidence is going, this team's almost unbeatable. And if they're going to shoot like they did against Xavier last night, I don't think there's anyone in the country that could really take them down. And, you know, the streak's passing our eye test right now. You're looking at right now, and UConn really has ascended to the blue bloods. You know, 6 national championships. We got more than Duke.
Right.
We have more than Kansas. You know, it's no longer a conversation of whether or not UConn is a blue blood. But what happened to them earlier this week is something that doesn't typically happen to blue bloods. Now, I know if you look at metrics, Michigan is 1 in Ken Palm. They're 1 defensively. They're in the Big Ten, which has 5 teams in the top 15 right now at the AP poll. But UConn not losing, ranked number 2 in the AP poll the week before, dropped a spot. I know the players don't really think about it, but I know with Danny and feeling slighted, you gotta believe that was bulletin board material. But let's take a deeper dive into these numbers with UConn and Michigan and kind of some of the thought process, because it really goes to a bigger conversation. UConn is in great position right now to get a number 1 seed overall. But going through the East is going to be very different than potentially going through the South and potentially playing a team like Houston in their home area down in Texas. It wouldn't be very beneficial for them when we could take that DC path. Now, UConn fans, I know, particularly I was down there in 06 for the George Mason loss down in DC. It doesn't bring up great memories.
My great history.
You can take a bus over flying, and it's not a bad thing. And, you know, it's looking right now, UConn's going to be in the Philly region. But, John, what do you attribute to Michigan jumping over UConn in the AP poll?
Basically the fact that we were kind of just sleepwalking for the past month. I'll say it, the full January, we sleptwalked. We did enough to win the games. We didn't blow anybody out. When we had the opportunity to blow people out, we let them back into the games. So as we moved up to number 2, Michigan had a great week. Whether or not they deserve to jump us is another question. But they, from a UConn perspective, it was just we really weren't challenged. We didn't have that team on the schedule yet. The St. John's that are coming up. Villanova, we did play. It wasn't the greatest game that we played either. But Michigan winning 2 games against top 10 teams, one on the road and one at home, is gonna shouldn't have changed anything in my mind, because they led for 1 minute of the game against Nebraska, the most important minute of the game.
Yep.
And then Michigan State, they let Michigan State back in the game when they were up 16 at halftime, and it was tied with about 8 minutes left, I believe, and then they started to pull away again. Watching those games, I wasn't saying like this deserves to be the number 2 team in the nation or this should be the number 1 team in the nation. But hey, when you knock off 2 teams that are in the top 10 of both polls, people are going to overreact and they're going to jump them ahead of UConn based on the play that UConn had that pretty much for the month of January.
I think the interesting thing, and I know Ken Palm has Michigan ranked as 1. When you look at their quad 1 wins, there's a quantity of quad 1 wins,
Right.
but I'm not seeing the quality. Yes, no. Gonzaga is 22-1, and they took them to the woodshed. Auburn, a bubble team right now. San Diego State, Coach Dutcher always does a great job, and Jamie Dixon at TCU. I don't even know if TCU is going to make the tournament. So when I look at those wins, Gonzaga, that's their bell cow victory. Yes, you win at Sparty. That's always difficult. Nebraska, Hoiberg has done an amazing job this year, and they don't sleep on Nebraska, much like people shouldn't have slept on Indiana football over the past couple of years. Yeah. But Fred Hoiberg's got that thing going, and they got a bunch of really solid players. But when I look at their wins versus UConn's, and I know it was earlier in the season in the non-conference, but BYU has been top 10 to top 15 all years. Illinois has jumped all the way up to number 5 in the rankings. Right. Florida is rounding in the form. Anytime you go to Fogg and beat Bill Self, that's unheard of. And even Sean Miller at Texas, Sean knows how to play.
They're playing well right now. They were at the time. I was like, they're not going to even make the tournament. Now they're like the last 8 teams in right now, according to certain people, bracketologists. So yeah, and that's looking like even a better win now. So.
And the Arizona loss, you lose to the number 1 team in the country without the defensive player of the year candidate, our best rebounder, without the walking bucket, Braylon Mullins, and you lose that game by 4 when you took the lead late in the game, and you have a freshman on the line with a chance to win the game, who is really a Big Ryba's coming out party, who did a wonderful job in that game. Again, I think Michigan's a great team. I think, truthfully, from my vantage point, UConn and Michigan are the 2 best teams in the country right now. Not to knock what Arizona has done, but the front court of Yaxelberg and Johnson and Mara, you have 6'9", 6'9", 7'3", and even Elliot Cadeau, people remember him from his time at North Carolina where he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn from 3. Guys draining threes right now, and everything that they thought of as a player, they're a dangerous team. Dusty May has been there before. He's got that Final Four pedigree. Really looking at the Big Ten, Matt Painter and Izzo have really run Rampshaw, over the past decade. But Dusty May is right up there with him. I think one of the interesting things that I did see, and this is really going to go into our next point, for midseason coach of the year, Danny Hurley is not even in the top 12 right now. It blows my mind. I'm flummoxed with being 22-1, the last 4 years in college basketball, they have been the gold standard.
Yeah.
How does he not get the love? I'm seeing articles about Michigan as the best coaching staff in the country. When you look at UConn that's been together with Kamani, with Luke, with Nardi coming on, with Tom Moore overseeing the program, I don't understand where they're not getting the love nationally. And I know that it was a step back last year, but where do you go from winning back-to-back national championships and, boat racing teams?
Right. Which hasn't been done in 20 years prior or whatever it was.
Yep.
And then probably 2 minutes away from maybe having the upset of the year in the tournament. Like I don't know how Danny doesn't get any respect right now at the 22-1. Who else is on that list that's like the front runners right now? I'm assuming Dusty May and
Dusty. Well, actually, Tommy Lloyd, because they're undefeated.
Yeah.
Travis Steele, former Xavier coach, who's got Miami of Ohio, 23-0 as well. Matt Painter is up there. John Shire, the usual suspects. Kelvin's up there.
I just think it's Danny's. Yeah, I just think it's Danny's bravado that rubs people the wrong way. So it's like, I hate this kind of making with the whole situation going on with the Patriots and the Hall of Fame voting right now, and how everybody's up in arms like Kraft and Belichick didn't get in as first ballot Hall of Famers, but it's because they rubbed the people the wrong way and did things that they shouldn't have done. Danny, I'm not saying he did anything wrong, but he rubs people the wrong way. So even though this might be one of his better jobs, coming off of last year where it was a down year, right? You make it to the second round of the NCAA tournament after winning 2 championships, but I don't know why he doesn't get the love, especially playing tough non-conference games, winning those games more importantly. And you can't, if the Big East is down this year, we know that. You can't hold that against them. Can't hold that against UConn either as a team.
No, and to your point, it's really, I think there's 3 teams that as of today are locks. I'd say UConn, St. John's, and Villanova. Mm-hmm. I think Seton Hall still has some work to do, but playing them at Prudential, which has also been our house of horrors, you got to give Shaheen credit. I mean, that was a program where they were talking about him potentially being on the hot seat, and would he be able to turn it around in this NIL era? And college basketball is really the one sport, and college football coaching has such an impact. And what Danny has brought to this program is incredible. But, if we're looking at some other awards and another snub, you got Solo in the top 10 for the Jerry West. He's had an up and down season. Naismith Defensive Players of the Year, Terrace and Silas. The Oscar Robertson Award, Alex Carabin. Alex is really getting a lot of credit, I think, for his leadership, which is good to see. He's also Player of the Year, top 25 right now midseason. But I think one of the things that drew my attention, Silas Demary being left off of the Bob Cousy Award list. He's really the head of the snake. And I was going back and, Danny always loves to compare him to Tristan. Yeah. And when you look at Tristan's first season, and you had the Boneyard really trashing him, and do we have a point guard?
I wasn't sold on him either, even after winning the championship.
And what he turned into. But his numbers, his first year, Tristan averaged 10.1 points a game, 4.5 rebounds, and 4.7 assists. Through February 4th, Silas is averaging 10.9 points, 4.3 rebounds, 6.2 assists. He's shooting 47% from behind the arc. He got his 1,000th career point against Villanova the other day. The light bulb's going on, and that really brings UConn's level to another level. And it really puts them in that elite category, in that elite conversation.
Absolutely. And I think the whole thing with Silas was he, in the non-conference, wasn't great. He had a good game. He had a great game against BYU. Played well in Zona, but Kansas, Florida, and Texas, I think he only played like an average of 20 minutes in those games, whether it was ineffectiveness or foul trouble. And he didn't put up, stats that people want to, see for these award lists. So I think that's where he got hurt, for at least for the award list. But the difference between him and Newton was Newton in those non-conference games, I think he played extremely well. And then when he came into the Big East season, his play kind of slid that first year a little bit. I'm seeing the opposite here with Silas, and I'm seeing like, okay, so BYU, I'm like, all right, we got another great guard coming in here. And then I'm like, let's see where this goes. And now I'm like, I think he's kind of understands the offense now completely. He's slowed down his play too. He's more under control. In the beginning of the year, I thought he was over dribbling, trying to penetrate. Then he would clog up the middle, and him and Reed would be literally on the post together, and there would be a deadbolt turnover at some point. And now I think he's got the flow going better on the offense. And I think his outside shooting, I think he's shooting, what do you say, 46% from three or something in that?
Yeah, he's around 47% from three. He's shooting 56%, 57% his last 4 games from three. And that really, and the confidence with him. And, what I like about him, which took Tristan about a year to learn, was you can take the game over.
Right.
When UConn needs a bucket, he's not shy. He's not bashful. He'll defer and he'll set guys up. But when it comes to crunch time, he's a guy I'm confident with the ball in his hands that he's going to make a good decision.
So that being said, then, like coming down the stretch now, who's our go-to guy down the stretch? Are we going to let Silas run the point and see whatever he feels the best option is, or is he going to force it, or what do you? Or is it going to be Mullins?
So I think that's a great point. And I think what makes UConn special is that they're not an ISO basketball team. And even Donnie and Fanta were making this point last night. Even in a game where they're up 28 points in the last 6-7 minutes, they're still executing their offense. And
that was great to see.
So to not, back out and duck the question, it's who's hot that night. Providence game, it was Braylon. BYU game, it was Silas. Illini game, it was Malachi Smith. It's really who's the hot hand. And the beautiful thing about the offense is it could be anyone. I still believe Solo is going to have a big moment this year. Alex is a guy when they've needed a big shot. I think the Georgetown game, hitting the three. It's death by 1,000 cuts, this team. It's really, the beauty is any one of the guys could take over. And even if they need a bucket the same way the 22-23 team fed the ball into the post to Dama, Terrace is a walking bucket. He's a walking mismatch. And although his stats don't say it, because I think they were saying he has like 32 assists versus 33 turnovers, he's actually doing a better job of passing out of the double teams right now. I'm seeing he's looking up. He's made a Klingon did a great job, and Samson Johnson from the top of the key. Terrace is improving in that area. And what I'm not seeing this year, which we saw last year, was those dumb fouls 25, 27 feet away from the basket where he would get a moving screen violation. What we're seeing with Silas right now is that reaching now. Terrace is a little bit too aggressive sometimes and picks up those cheap fouls. But he's staying on the court. It's given Ryba time to learn. So to really go back and answer your question, I think it depends on the night and it depends on the matchup, and I'm thinking about that Kansas game as well. And Braylon really just coming back and taking over. He's a guy, every time he shoots it, I think it's going in. So I'm very confident with him. But yeah, no, I think it could really be anyone. So, UConn's a team that doesn't play for individual awards. They're really playing for banners and trophies. And the reason it matters to this program is when the calendar flips. When we're looking at February and March, over their championship seasons, 22 and 23, they had that January swoon. They were 8-1. The 23-24 year, they went 9-1. So this is really where we're going to learn a lot about this UConn team. They got 2 games with St. John's. They have a game with Villanova. They play at Marquette. It's always tough to win at Marquette, although this is not Shaka's best team. They have Creighton at home. They have Seton Hall at home. Again, the Big East isn't going to give you the top 25 matchups that you're seeing in the Big 10 or the Big 12. But these teams know UConn. Familiarity breeds contempt. And then I'm interested to see how they finish down the stretch. It's going to go a long way, and making sure this team hasn't plateaued. And, where is this February mindset? And where's that go into the St. John's game? St. John's winners of 8 straight right now. Really UConn's biggest competition in the Big East. What are your thoughts going into the matchup on Friday in Storrs South?
Right. Well, so first off, I'm interested to see how loud MSG is going to be on Friday night. And I'm wondering if it is going to be Storrs South or if the St. Johnny's fans are actually going to buy up all the tickets for once and make it an actual home court advantage. Now, if it's like, I think it might be a 70-30 situation. So if that's the case, it's going to be a tough game for UConn. But I think it really just comes down to the one matchup and one matchup only, the inside with Zuby and Terrence. And I think whoever really sets the tone in there, and if Terrence can get Zuby in foul trouble, I think the game's over, in my opinion. I don't think their guards and forwards match up well with us. And I don't think defensively they are a really strong team. So I think they'll get caught up in the sets that we run. I think we'll see what we saw in the last handful of games offensively. And then the question will become, like I said, if Terrence doesn't get in foul trouble and plays, he doesn't even have to outplay Zuby, but plays even with them and hold Zuby to an average game, I don't think this game's even close, in my opinion.
A lot of Husky faithful are hoping you're right, John.
I might be overly optimistic on this, but hey, that's the way I see
it. You're looking at St. John's, much like UConn last year. They hit the portal. Dylan Mitchell has really done a wonderful job since he's been inserted into the starting lineup. Ian Jackson was a project, much like Aiden Mahaney last year for UConn. They really didn't solve that position. But with Hopkins and Ejiofor down low, they're going to battle Alex and Terrace. And, Zuby is playing right now, player of the year in the Big East, potentially. It's going to be an interesting matchup to see how that plays out. But I agree. St. John's is going to come at them. I think back to the first game at Gampel last year where UConn jumped on them early and they didn't sustain it. This St. John's team isn't as good defensively as they were last year, but, Rick's going to pull out the full court press. The Garden is going to be popping, but, I'm interested to see. So I think, that's going to do it for our first episode of the Gampel Effect. We broke down the wins, the numbers, the context, the eye test. But at the end of the day, this is still UConn basketball. And when the team is connected, defending, sharing the ball, and playing with that edge, there aren't many programs in the country that want any part of it. February and March are where this program separates itself. We've seen it before. That's the standard here in Storrs, and this group knows exactly what time it is. Big one coming up. The Big East race is tightened, at least between St. John's and UConn. We'll be back next week breaking down the St. John's game and the early game. John and I thank you for your time. We're happy this is our maiden voyage, and we look forward to connecting with the audience more. John?
Yeah, I'm glad we finally got to do this. This has been great, and hopefully we will be dissecting a UConn win next week. Take care.
Later.